At the beginning of day 4, you used the data group container to display employee information in a repeating item renderer. Now that you know how to create and apply Spark skins, I will introduce you to the Skinnable data container as the skinnable equivalent to the data group container. You will learn how to create a skin for the Skinnable data container and how to further modify the associated item renderer. This is the Employee Portal employee directory display that you created in day 4 with the data group container and an item renderer. Each employee has a discrete background display. In this video, I will show you how to convert the data group container into a skinnable data container and then apply this light gray background around the entire list of employees. I will also show you how to modify the item renderer to create a subtle hovered state for each employee. In earlier videos, you learned that the data group container itself is not skinnable. However, it does have a skinnable equivalent, the Skinnable data container class. The only difference between the two is that the Skinnable data container can have visual elements applied to it. You apply a skin class to it using the skin class property. This is the main application file for my example. I am locating the data group container and changing the opening and closing tags to the Skinnable data container. When I save the file and run the application, you can see that the application looks the same as it did before you applied the new container. I'm returning to the main application file and highlighting the opening Skinnable data container tag and switching to design mode. In the properties view for the Skinnable data container, I'm clicking the icon to the right of the skin field and selecting the Create Skin option, which is outside your field of view. In the new MXML skin dialog, I'm typing skins for the package and background skin for the name. I'm clicking Finish, and the new skin file opens in the editor view. This file is configured with a contract between the host component and the Skinnable data container class. It also contains a states block with the normal and disabled views. Below the states block, I'm adding a rect primitive and adding the height and width properties and setting their values to 100% and 120 pixels respectively. I'm also adding the radius X and radius Y properties and setting their values to 4. Within the rect block, I'm adding a fill property, and inside the fill block I'm adding an instance of the solid color class and assigning it the alpha property with the value of 0.4 and the color property with the value of black. This rect block draws a black rectangle that is lightened with an alpha property and has rounded corners. You learned about all of these elements earlier in this day of training. I'm saving this file and returning to the main application file. Notice that the skin class property has been added to the Skinnable data container class, and it is referencing the skins.backgroundSkin class. When I save the file and run the application, you can see that the skin has been applied to the Skinnable data group container, but the content is not centered within the skin. Remember from the previous videos that the application container has one skin part named content group that represents all the content in the container. The skinnable data container likewise has one skin part, but its name is data group, and it is an instance of the data group container. It represents all the content in the container. In my example, that would be all the employees displayed via the item renderer. At the end of the background skin.mxml file, I am locating the data group container with the ID property value of data group. I'm assigning the data group container the horizontal center property with a value of 0. I'm removing the left, right, and top properties and reassigning the bottom property to a value of 5. When I save the file and run the application, you can see that the data is now centered within the skin, but notice that when I mouse over an employee, there's a small rectangle that indicates that I'm hovering over the item. This occurs because the top property of the border container of the employee item renderer class has been set previously. Remember that each item renderer display is defined in the item renderer property class. To create the skin for each of the item renderer instances, you simply add the visual elements to the renderer class file. Back in the main application file, I'm opening the employee item renderer by control-clicking on it. This border container block draws the background for each item renderer and also displays the employee data. I'm cutting the top property from the opening border container tag and saving the file. I'm returning to the background skin MXML file and pasting the top property into the opening tag. I'm saving the file and running the application. When I mouse over an employee now, the rectangle above the employee item is now gone, but I also want to add a hover effect. Back in the employee item renderer.mxml file, I am adding another state instance to the states block and setting the name property to hovered. Below the border container instance, I'm creating a rect instance with a height value of 100% and a width value of 100%. This will create a rectangle that will completely overlay the item renderer. Next, I'm creating a fill property tag set with a nested solid color instance that has an alpha value of 0.2. This makes the highlight transparent. Lastly, I'm adding a color property with a value of $FFFFFF to create a white highlight when a user hovers over the item with the mouse. This code would display the new rectangle all the time. I'm adding the include in property to the rect instance to define that it should only appear in the hovered state. I'm also adding .hovered to the color property as well. When I save the file and run the application, you can see the hovered effect when I mouse over an employee. For your next step, work through the exercise titled Skinning the Skinnable Data Container.